So the first question is it necessary to determine volume in receiving chamber for new equipment? My personal recommendation is that the apparatus need to be qualified. It is true that the newer equipment have been manufactured with much better tolerance than in the past, and once the volume is qualified. But what is the opinion of some of my FDA colleagues? What do you think is appropriate? Should we have a requirement for sponsors to determine volume diametrically like we do now, or is nominal volume acceptable?
Tapash, would you like to comment first, and then I can comment?
I think we always ask the sponsor or applicant, whatever you call it, to develop the method and validate it. So basically, we are sometimes flexible. So I don't think it is written on the stone that you have to do this way or that way. But what we typically ask them that no matter what you do, you just give us the data and the validation report. So as long as they can show that it is a validated method with the sensitivity, robustness, selectivity, everything, in my opinion, at least from the new drug side, we tend to accept it. I do not know exactly how the generic world works on it. Maybe Sam, you can shed more light on that. So.
Well, I think it's true that a lot of the modern manufacturing processes have been able to be much more precise in the development of these glass diffusion cells, and sometimes they're not glass, but just because it's new doesn't mean that it necessarily utilizes one of these more modern manufacturing processes. And so depending upon where you're buying your equipment from, and there are suppliers all over the world, the question at the end of the day is, has your apparatus been qualified? Is it fit for purpose? Do you really understand your apparatus? And so I think as part of apparatus qualification, it is appropriate to measure the volumes, also because the calculations that you do, the volumes that you utilize in your calculations, you may be assuming certain things about the nominal volume reported by a given manufacturer. You may not know, does that include the stir bar, for example? And so your calculations could be wrong if you don't measure and characterize that volume and then understand how to utilize those parameters in your own calculations, and to understand, what is the variability as part of that qualification of the apparatus. So the short answer is, I think it's important to qualify your apparatus, whether it's old or new, so that you understand what you're working with.
Can I raise some other questions to the audience as well as to the panel? Okay, so it may not be related to what Kailash is showing. So should we continue on the Kailash's presentation, or she can take it off from the screen and then we can go back to the panel mode and start discussion? Yeah.
So, let's do one thing, Tapash.
Okay.
Let's quickly go through these, and then we can come back to you. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay.
So, Sam, to your answer, my question was, would it be acceptable if, let's say, you get a new apparatus in, we buy that, and then with the way we lab is going to be using that VDC with a stir bar in and qualify the apparatus and come up with very good tolerance on the volume and qualify that apparatus that way, then you don't have to nominally determine the volume of the cell every time. Is that something acceptable?
Yes, and I guess the cautionary note I want to make here is that we may have a tendency to assume, when we say new equipment, we may assume who that new equipment is coming from, because there are some major suppliers of this equipment. But I can also tell you there are suppliers of this equipment all over the world. And I know that people are buying equipment from suppliers that I did not know existed. This is new equipment, and I really don't have a sense of how precisely that volume is controlled in their manufacturing process from diffusion cell to diffusion cell. So I think the bottom line is, when it's a blanket open question, is it necessary to determine the volume of receiving chamber for new equipment?
Yes.
I don't see why you would want to leave that unknown, because that volume can impact your calculations. And then, speaking to your point, once it's been characterized, once you know what the volume is for a given diffusion cell, you don't have to measure it, again. You know what it is, and you utilize that from that point forward. And if it turns out that it is incredibly precise across all your diffusion cells, and it's, your nominal volume is 5 mils, and you measure it, and it's 5 mils, plus or minus 10 microliter differences, and you want to just say, well, I'm just going to use 5 mils for my nominal volume in all my calculations. I'm not actually going to have to say this is 5.01 and that one is, 5.0. Yeah, I think if that's your question, that's probably fine. If you just kind of say, I've qualified my apparatus, it's extremely precise, this is the tolerance, and I'm just going to use my nominal volume and justify it that way. But you still have to measure the volume to be able to support that justification, in my opinion.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, thank you. So for the method parameters, the question is, how does one select membrane? This is a very open question, I guess, but let me just go through. If anyone wants to, I guess Leandro went through, all the different parameters for the chapter that we have in there. Would anyone like to answer this?